Modernity hurls humans and animals headlong into a new adventure. The boundaries of what is possible shift. New questions emerge.
We have forgotten our place in the world. In fact, we somewhat lost sight of where we are going.
Humans complete their ascent to being masters of the world. But even in the age of efficiency, animals conquer new niches.
Yes, it's not crazy to consider your cat or your dog a member of your family, or in even some cases like a child. That's a relatively new phenomenon.
The bond between human and animal seems stronger than ever. But will it survive the digital age? Chicken is probably the most successfully domesticated animal in the world. Even though it is estimated that there are currently more than 30 billion chickens, the individual animal mostly remains invisible. Koen van Mechelen from Genk in Belgium wants to change that. The artist is obsessed with Gallus domesticus, the domestic chicken, a species that fits us humans so perfectly that we have long forgotten to marvel at it. For Van Mechelen, however, each individual bird is a miracle of feathers, flesh and blood, living material for his art.
They have enormous freedom, and when they feel captivity, then they feel stress, and this is what I don't like. So I like to release them and to let them to be like they are. And it's a very beautiful one, this one. So that's, I select this one for the ladies over there.
The artist chooses the most fitting chicken for his purpose.
If I look at this, then I'm thinking about my own freedom. I think that we have to share freedom with everything that lives on this planet. That's the only way how you can preserve, actually, the biodiversity and also the cultural diversity, I think, because it goes on two levels. So for me, domestication is a very important step in history. We cannot be angry on the domestication, but we can be criticizing of comment for sure that if we go too far, that we are losing track.
The idea of his cosmopolitan chicken project? Combining the genetic material of all chickens in one. Van Mechelen has been crossing chicken breeds from every country for more than 20 years. Each new generation thus adds the genome of another nation. Almost 30 breeds are in this egg.
These are the eggs for the next crossing, which is the 26th generation. So in the egg, it contains now the 26th generation, the Mechelse Helvetica. Last year, I did a crossing with Croatia, and this year it will be with Israel. I think with this, it will be completely diverse.
The more breeds, the greater the genetic diversity of his chickens, so the theory goes.
Once in a while, we have to break the frame that we put around this monoculture chicken. We have to bring other blood into these species. And crossbreeding is the case. So we put a frame around a living animal. And by crossbreeding it, you break that frame and you start evolution.
Koen van Mechelen is an artist who works not only with colors and sounds, but also with genetic material. Hidden beneath a paper-thin eggshell, a chicken heart begins to beat after about 5 days in the incubator. Unlike with chicken, which we can only actually encounter in endless uniformity as chicken breast or grilled chicken, diversity is not only desired in humans' best friend, it is even visible at first glance. Apparently, different rules apply to pets.
Most people are happy when they have the opportunity to live with an animal, especially one that is as socially close to us as a dog. And we also have good data showing that people who have a good relationship with their dogs are healthier and feel better than comparable people without dogs. The evidence is so clear that you could actually say that people without dogs are not quite complete. We are adapted to a life with other animals, to social coexistence with other animals, especially with dogs.
A respectful coexistence one has to be able to afford.
Your pug wants a bite of the cake. So cute.
Which quickly turns into decadence.
May I clear the table and give the leftovers to my boy?
Nein.
No, he's not done yet. Once he is, you can clear the table, but leave the cake for my sweetie. Right? Look. My little gourmet. It's gone.
So it's really interesting. There's been some scientific research done recently on the way that dogs sort of have hijacked, if you want to use that word, the same biological sort of response pathway that infants do. So, for example, when a mother holds her young baby, the baby looks in the mother's eyes and it causes this release of sort of biochemicals in the brain that activate this sort of feeling of bonding. Well, they found with dogs, and I don't think they've tried this with cats, but they found with dogs, almost the same thing happens, that when the owner stares into the dog's eyes, it activates this same sort of biochemical process. And some people will say, oh, that's wonderful. It shows that our pets, we feel about our pets the same way that we feel about our children. And some people say that's terrible. Pets are these parasites. They've evolved to sort of hijack this infant response system, and they're just sort of taking advantage of us. Probably not on purpose, but they've evolved to elicit this, and that's why, But however you come down on that debate, the fact of the matter is that this is not just in our, this is not just sort of in our heads. This is part of our biology.
In the great economic upswing in the mid-19th century, many lapdogs were better off than most children.
Okay. This is all we have today.
But poor people appreciate animals too. Industrialization reshapes the world. People leave their villages and move to the cities. Machines take over the labor of many farm animals. The new order produces winners and losers, rich and poor, domestic and farm animals.
That, I think, is the big event which happened in the course of industrialization and mechanization. Before, animals were appreciated because of their many advantages. People didn't want to treat them carelessly because they knew that they needed them for many other purposes, not just for their meat. And suddenly the animals became cattle for slaughter. That's a paradigm shift, an enormous one.
The animal becomes a protein machine, part of a machinery driven by the human need for more. Cows and pigs appear only in their individual parts, cut up on the production line and packed in cans to feed a growing population.
And then we have these huge animal factories that we can hardly imagine. You see photos of sheep lined up in rows with their necks tied up high so that someone can walk by and cut their throats more easily and so on. Actually, those pictures don't even show the last step of the mechanization of animal farming. And yet people already find that unbearable. Sometimes I would like to ask people where they think the meat on their plates comes from.
Koen van Mechelen's farm offers a way out of this eternal cycle of birth and slaughter. A life as a domesticated animal in the service of art. Free from the first breath to the last, literally. In Van Mechelen's hands, cattle for slaughter turn into art.
For me, it's like magic because you give it a temperature of 37.6 degrees and 70 humidity, and then after 21 days, it just jumps out of the egg when it is lucky. The chick takes the air inside and breaks the scale. So it's an unbelievable moment. It's the moment between life and death. And every time when I look at it, I'm thinking, this is what we have to do all the time. You have to break the scale at the right moment in order to make evolution. Maybe this one who get born now will change a lot in humanity. Welcome in the world. Welcome in the world of art.
Koen van Mechelen provides a new look at a species that has been with humans for at least 4,000 years, and whose life today mostly takes place behind concrete and wire mesh, because we probably couldn't bear the sight of the animals any other way, the artist suspects.
Mankind is always thinking about more and growing. So the Industrial Revolution, in one way or another, well, it shows that it has no respect. It lost the respect for nature. And this is the point, I think. As long that you have the personal contact with this animal, it's very difficult to disrespect. And I think when there is a big distance and everything is in a closed box, like being in a barn, you know, totally isolated from the world that we live in, I think this is the moment that we lose it. And the moment of losing it is losing respect for life. And this is, in my opinion, where it goes wrong. But nature is telling you always when it goes wrong.
At the beginning of the third millennium, we literally turned nature upside down. The animals to which we owe our rise as masters of the world are treated as our worst enemy.
To this day, it is difficult to film slaughterhouses. Not just in general, because filming in slaughterhouses is difficult, but because it is difficult to not feel like you're doing something you're not supposed to. It is a feeling of guilt that killing encompasses. Sometimes there's no way around it, but it requires something like a ritual of atonement.
Perhaps the land of animals in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern offers an apology to farm animals. Piglets here are not neutered. Instead, they wear sunscreen as a protection from the sun which would quickly burn the skin of modern porkers. The land of animals is a retirement home for pigs, sheep and poultry that escaped slaughter one way or another. Photographer Nikita Teryoshin immortalizes animal personalities in his portraits.
The idea is to convey the topic of factory farming, for example, by showing the treatment of animals. So it's good if the photo doesn't seem ordinary.
And what is less ordinary than a pig in an open meadow, when this kind of animal normally never sees sunlight at all?
All animals that live here are here only because someone used them for some purpose, whether it be for their meat, their eggs, their fur, or whatever. So they were adapted to people's needs. That's basically what domestication is. Therefore, they are unfortunately dependent on humans. They can't live on their own. But now they're here, and it's important to us that they don't have to fulfill any needs, neither the animals themselves nor their products. Now they have a place where they can live freely.
At the farm of Grace, Nikita Teryoshin takes photos of the farm animals' new life. Wool that is scattered in the woods to return it to the cycle of nature. The animals here don't serve the purpose they were honed for thousands of years. Relics, as if from a foreign world. Teryoshin shows animals that are allowed to grow old. Sheep with wrinkles, and pigs in the moonlight.
The idea is also to take a look behind the cooling counter. What goes on behind the counter of a supermarket? What is behind the picture on the milk carton? A beautiful meadow where the cows graze, maybe? What does the reality look like? The idea behind my exhibition, Hornless Heritage, was to give a glimpse of the current milk industry, how it works, and how the animal becomes a part of the whole machinery.
Teryoshin also knows the other side, the life of an animal in high-performance mode.
The calves are taken away from their mothers. She always has to be pregnant to give milk, and if it goes well, she'll live 5 years instead of 25. The horns are taken off. When I saw the advertisement, "Don't let cows waste your money," that was really the point when I said I'm going to do this work now, regardless of whether I get paid for it or not. But it's my task. That's how I saw it. I knew something that many people didn't know, and I have to pass on this knowledge.
The photographer uses his creativity for those animals that are subjected to an industrial exploitation process.
One of the frustrations is that when it comes to policy in terms of enacting what an ethics towards non-human life would mean, you have to, again, usually give some reason why it's of human use. And I would say it's of human use because we should not be acting in evil ways. We should not, it is self-impoverishing when we do not act ethically towards animals, when we do not act humanely towards animals. It impoverishes us. I believe it infects the human world in ways that we maybe don't even recognize.
Chickens in particular have the potential to literally infect humans. Huge global populations of immunocompromised and genetically similar animals in a very small space are the ideal breeding ground for pandemics. Especially since factory farming goes hand in hand with antibiotic use. Koen van Mechelen believes his chickens are less susceptible to disease or the emergence of a pandemic because of their genetic diversity. A blood analysis will provide information about their genetic variability.
And this is the one from Israel now. There's actually the pure race, the Baladi from Israel. So it's going well.
Yeah, this is
it's
going
taking
well.
great.
That's enough.
This is the content of what I'm doing, to see if there are advantages or disadvantages in the crossbreeding. And by analyzing the blood, that gives you an answer on it. For me, it's the ascension of life. And that we can catch it in numbers and letters. It's for me a world that I didn't know that it exists.
The chickens of the Cosmopolitan Chicken Project are works of art with a practical use. The proof is in their blood. Diversity and the crossing of as many breeds as possible create genetically superior individuals.
We have analyzed all the DNA up till, I think, generation 21 or 22. When you look at the SNPs present in his material, we saw that the variability, the heterozygosity, increased by generations. So, indeed, his idea about creating variability and introducing extra genes or extra SNPs, well, that has worked.
Does the answer to factory farming, which in its current form poses a great danger to humanity, lie in the genetic treasury of a Belgian artist of all places?
Domestication and further kinds of domestication attempts, aside from designer choices, they're only going to be useful if they help us solve problems that the world has, having to do with hunger, having to do with growing wealth in developing countries, people wanting access to meat, wanting access to other things. That's a way that it could certainly go.
And indeed, the first meat that requires neither barn nor slaughterhouse has long been produced.
Animals in general are not efficient meat-making machines. We've been trying to turn them into efficient meat-making machines for centuries now, but at the end of the day, they've evolved for their own means of survival. If you take the animals out of the equation and you grow the tissues that you would like to eat directly, you save so much resources, time, and energy, since you're not growing organs that you don't want to eat. You're not growing beaks, feathers. You're not using a whole animal just to take a certain sample of it in order to consume.
Shia Friedman and her team from the Tel Aviv-based startup Supermeat want to ignite nothing less than the next evolutionary stage of domestication, meat without animals. It is called cultured meat or lab-grown meat, and it aims to reconcile vegetarians and meat-eaters and send them on a joint sustainability mission.
Israel is the world's largest poultry consumer per capita. We're #1 in chicken. We love our chicken. We eat chicken all the time. It is one of the reasons why it was very important for us to focus on chicken, since it is such a large industry and it's a product that is consumed all around the world. For that reason, it is important for us to provide an additional set of tools for the existing poultry industry.
Instead of focusing on renouncing meat or changing behavior, the company relies on technology that produces animal protein in a climate-friendly way and avoids ethical problems in the treatment of animals. It sounds like The Magic Porridge Pot, a story in which a pot cooks endless amounts of sweet porridge.
The beautiful thing about this process is that it's an exponential process. The cells double every couple of hours. So imagine having a flock of 1,000 chickens, fully grown, ready to be slaughtered chickens who have reached their slaughter weight. And you take only 500 of these chickens to slaughter, and you come back the next day and you find yet again, 1,000 fully grown, ready for slaughter chickens. You can't do that with an animal, since an animal needs to be grown and needs to grow. But with cells multiply quickly. That's the beautiful thing about cells and about this process, is that it's extremely efficient.
So far, the quantities produced this way are sufficient for a few restaurants at best. But if the lab-grown meat startups are successful, the coexistence of humans and animals could be on the verge of a new era, without cows, pigs, and chickens.
I think in my heart of hearts that there's something special about these animals, there's something special about our bond with these animals that can't be broken anymore. And I think no matter what happens to us and no matter what comes along, that these animals will always be very special to us. I think maybe the only thing that might change is that we may start to develop special relationships with other types of animals. You know, if the day comes where we don't eat animals anymore, what will happen to all of these animals that we've sort of raised as livestock? You know, will they disappear, or will we develop some sort of relationship with them?
Trim the claws,
Vorne,
front,
hinten,
back,
Geschlechtsecken sauber
clean the
machen,
scent glands,
gucken, ob die beiden Glocken dran
see
sind
if both balls are there.
und sein Penis darf nicht
The
kaputt
penis
sein.
can't be injured.
Wenn das natürlich
Otherwise, he
kaputt
can't
ist,
score a
dann
goal
macht er im B.
or shoot
Dann
his
macht er
shot.
Flieger.
He'd miss.
Dann macht er keine
He'd be benched.
Punkte.
Then
Dann
he's only good to eat.
ist er nur noch gut für die Pfanne.
Ulrich Frigge from Hamm, Westphalia, is a rabbit breeder, and Hänschen is his masterpiece, a real world champion. In France, monks domesticated rabbits around 1,600 years ago as a culinary delight. Frigge, however, enjoys his rabbits primarily with his eyes.
Fell,
Fur, well groomed.
da hat er seine 14,
He got 14.5 points for that.
Farbe 9.
Colour, 9.5.
Ihr Körperform
Body,
dürfen keine
no
Knochen.
pointy bones.
Der muss Kugel
He has to look round.
Da hat er
He got
seine
his
Note
19.5 points.
Pflegezustand
Overall condition
5.
5.
Damit hat
So
er
he got a total of 97.5, the most points out of his group.
von dem Schwarzkram.
Rabbit breeding leaves nothing to chance. Each characteristic for each breed is precisely defined and evaluated by judges, just like in figure skating. If the color or shape is wrong, the career will be over before it has even begun. There is little room for sentimentality.
Diese Dusche,
Some ink,
ich gebe keine Namen.
I don't name them.
Ich mal
If I ever wanted to slaughter one of them, it would be difficult emotionally if they had a
Da
name.
kann man sich schlecht von trennen, wenn die Namen haben. Deswegen bei
There
mir
is only one
hat
exception.
nur ein einziger Name, das ist Hänschen.
We see things as resources that are actually living beings, and this extends also to how we are now manipulating organisms. And you know, when you talk about domestication and biotech, which is another form of that that's coming up, in a way, you could say domesticated animals are a form of low-tech biotech anyway, and this is just an extension of that. That's something that really comes to mind as important, is that we, even in the way we create this new biotech, these new creatures, that we are not buying into these systems.
We created the conditions for them to evolve. And to me, that gives us, that's kind of wonderful in a way to think about they're only here because of us, and maybe we're only here because of them. And so we have a responsibility to them. And I think that responsibility extends to taking care of them as we take care of each other.
Taking care of billions of animals is a lot of responsibility, and soon humans may no longer need them if lab-grown meat will be produced in large quantities. Not every one of them will find an owner like Ulrich Frigge.
If Hähnchen dies, I will stuff him. If I make it another 10, 15 years, I'll take Hähnchen down with me, stuffed. Do you like it? Yeah, you do.
For Koen van Mechelen, too, parting with his animals is difficult. The chickens of the Cosmopolitan Chicken Project must not be butchered, of course. But at some point, even the longest chicken life comes to an end. The artist puts their carcasses in the freezer. Because death does not mean the end, but the beginning of a final transformation. The dead chickens go on a long journey in a plastic bag, to a destiny the artist sees fit. Van Mechelen knows it's a lot of effort for a dead chicken.
Who gives a shit about the chicken, you know? But to treat it as a piece of art, it becomes something else. And then you start to realize that every creature in this world, which is alive, has something to discuss and has something to say. This one is in good shape, so there is the feathers are nice, the color is nice, the legs are nice. So I hope that we can have a beautiful exemplar that we can sculpture, I have to say.
Taxidermist Robbie Robben helps Van Mechelen get his message across.
Maar mag lopend staan. Ofwel, ja, hey.
You rarely see stuffed chicken, and for Koen, it's a project because chicken is for most people just chicken.
Everything on the inside, entrails, fat and muscles, is removed. Only the skin with feathers will be left. The taxidermist then puts the skin over a previously prepared plastic body. Only then does the preserved specimen look like a chicken.
I don't see this as a mess. For me, this is an adventure to recreate a dead animal. I mean, recreation to bring it back in some kind of position that looks to be alive.
We are thinking that we are standing all above this. But in matter of fact, from the biological point of view, we are all such an animal. And for me, this is, in my thinking of making a metaphor with the chickens, I look at it and I said, if one day, you know, we are becoming the chickens, that will be for me the end of the world.
For Van Mechelen, the chicken's life ends with the kneeling of the artist. Will the stuffed chickens from Belgium soon be the last reminder of an animal species that no one will need in the future? A fate that could befall dogs in a similar way. For thousands of years, the dog has been the human's best friend and companion. But for some years now, it has been facing increasing non-biological competition. The ultimate promise of robots in animal form to be an even better companion for humans than the living, breathing originals. Is this what walking a dog will look like in the future?
Animals have been this supplementary non-human that we've used to partner with in the past. So we've domesticated animals for work, weaponry, companionship, not because they do what we do, but because their skill sets are so different from ours. And so when we're thinking about robotics and artificial intelligence, especially because
the skill sets of these machines are not like human skills. I think just using this animal analogy opens our minds to more possibilities and is a better way to think about technology.
Animal is the name of one such technology. A service robot from Zurich that is obviously reminiscent of dogs and the way they move. It can also climb stairs, for example. No need for paws. The 4 robot legs dance to its master's tune. However, it does not heed spoken commands, but those from its programmer's input.
For us, it's a huge success every time we're approached by customers who really have a problem. They say, I've got hundreds of kilometers of tunnel to inspect, but I can't find anyone to do it because it's too narrow and too damp down there. But from time to time, there are cable fires. Some of these are problems you can't even imagine. Some of the environments people work in are too dangerous, just so that we have power. They shouldn't have to do that. I do think we're on the verge of a paradigm shift.
And with it, a new era of cooperation. While the miners of the 18th and 19th centuries took canaries with them to be warned of deadly fire damp, the dangerous work of the future, both underground and above ground, will be done by creatures like Animal. Technology that we are supposed to trust like our companions since the Ice Age.
Right from the start, we wanted to build machines that don't seem more intelligent than they actually are. When it came to designing them, we deliberately went for a friendly look. Something resembling a face and eyes that say, I'm here to help you. I'm not trying to be something you don't want me to be.
Despite all the effort directed at design and charisma, on an emotional level, the robot dog seems different. Alien. The robot comes across less like a friend than like an intruder into our emotional life, which seems to be reserved for real animals.
It scares us often because it's clear that we're developing something that, like animals is, an intelligence that's different and something that we can relate to, but also might be able to do things that we can't do. And so I think a lot of people are a little bit afraid, but also at the same time, we can't take our eyes off of it, right? It's so fascinating that we are creating something that we perceive as life, and the potential for what that can do for us. I think that if we can get rid of some of the moral panic that we have around robots replacing humans or taking over the world and killing us all, I think that people start to see the true potential.
The progress in the fields of robotics and computer science within a few years is enormous. And yet, Animal lacks the elegance and autonomy with which wolves and dogs roam the woods. Programming such characteristics is still impossible. That's why, in the end, the service robot needs humans more than any lapdog.
My impression is that animals are still much more complex and multifaceted than any robot that I've seen so far. Their skill sets are still very limited. Like, they can be very strong and very good at doing one thing, and they can do it much better than an animal or a human. Even just, a calculator is much smarter than a human or an animal. But in terms of the complexity, we're nowhere close to living organisms.
So, is it a misconception that robots could one day be better than the animals that humans shaped according to their wishes and needs for tens of thousands of years? Or are we witnessing the beginning of a fast-paced evolution in which programming and robotics replace the principles of selection and breeding? An accelerated domestication at the end of which we will have creatures that even surpass humans? Such questions seem far away in Graubünden, Switzerland, where Jan de Noor lives and works harmoniously with his cold-blooded mare, Uranie.
In the past, there was no alternative to horses. Many carters did it out of necessity and not out of joy. And that's a very important aspect to me. You have to enjoy working with a horse. You can't just do it because you feel like you have to. I, for one, am way more content when walking behind a horse all day than when I'm working with a machine.
Every year in October, the second work season for farmer de Noor and his horses begins. Logging. Forestry work in places where machines can't or shouldn't go in the alpine winter.
I think you have to have a good relationship. You have to trust each other. The horse has to trust the carter and the other way around. The trust has to be there. Once it is, the horse knows exactly what to do and how to do it. It only takes a few years. Eventually, you don't even have to tell it what to do. But it is important to build that trust between you and your horse.
They are often gone for several days, just like their ancestors. No motor chugging, no engines, and no heavy machines that disturb the harmony. No stress or rush. Everything takes as long as it takes in the common rhythm of animal and human.
When I'm outside, I just feel much closer to nature and to the whole cycle of life. I'm a part of a bigger picture, and I can contribute to it.
Just the horses, the men, their sleds, the snow and the mountain. Hard work, of course, but there are clear limits.
I've rarely had such a good horse, particularly for the labor in the woods. You have to make a good team. You have to be a good fit. The carter has to be a good match for the horse and the other way around. What I really like about working with horses is the rhythm. When the animal gets tired, you usually get tired as well. And then you stop working automatically. That's not always the case if you work with machines.
Working with horses helps Jan de Noor and his colleagues keep a sense of moderation for their own energy, but also for the use of resources that the forest offers. Because overexploitation of nature is impossible with this type of logging. Jan de Noor's work in the Graubünden Alps is therefore sustainable in the best sense.
There are many advantages to using a horse in the woods. It's much less harmful to the soil. There's no ground pressure. You can move around plants better. You can plan the logging differently so that you don't need alleys or swathes. I do think it should be preserved. It's a pity, in my opinion, that if nobody does this, all the knowledge around it will be lost pretty fast. And if a new generation wanted to start doing it, they'd have to learn everything from scratch, which is way more difficult than preserving the knowledge that we have. It makes sense financially, and there's definitely enough work for everybody. And the other way around. If we use big machines, there are higher costs for the machines, and we have less employees and less work. Here it's the other way around. The wages make up the biggest part, and a smaller portion is spent on equipment.
5,000 years after its domestication, the horse is still unsurpassed for these men. After the day's work is done and they sit around a fire, they almost seem like a ghost from the past. Jan Denor and the other forest workers know their horses are the best partners one could wish for in this kind of work.
If we spent more time integrating domesticated animals into the landscapes while, so to speak, decommissioning a certain, portion of domesticated animals that we use for food by using synthetic meat, I think that would be amazing. There could be a future where we have things more in balance, we use less land for agriculture in general, and are much better off for it.
I find it hard to imagine that 500, let's say 1,000 years from now, if society is at all in any recognizable shape, I find it hard to imagine that there would be no domesticated animals. I find it, because we use animals at this point as so much more than food. Even if we could replicate their muscle tissue, even if we could replicate their hair or their milk, no robot can replicate the joy in your dog's eyes when you get home. No robot could replicate the feeling of sitting on the couch and having your cat jump on your lap. There's just no way this is going to happen. Or the pleasure people get from riding a horse. The pleasure people get from watching a horse do jumps. These kinds of things are not going away. So even perhaps in some aspects, but these animals they're part of us at this point, and they're going to be with us.
So the history of domestication is not finished or over. On the contrary, a reflection is overdue on the symbiosis of humans and their farm animals, which has already lasted more than 10,000 years. And perhaps this is the best way out of a crisis into which humans have maneuvered themselves. At the beginning of the third millennium, the place of animals in human life poses a new question, and one more urgent than ever.
I think it makes completely sense, to have a stuffed chicken standing as a sculpture inside a museum. Because in my opinion, if it is there, you can put it between all the other sculptures. People will always ask, what is the chicken doing between all the sculptures?
Even if every visitor has to find their own answer to this question, one thing is certain for the artist.
I think this is a lesson that we have to be more modest and that we have to change the way that we look into other species. Because until now, we're only looking to our own species. Since we have a brain, since we are named as human, we have to understand that we have to respect also other lives. So if we're talking about, for example, freedom, or we're talking about having respect, it's always in relation to the other.
The chicken, as a work of art, is a reminder to look not only at ourselves, but also at the animal species to which we owe so much.
The ideal chicken is the one who can conquer the environment and feels good in balance with this environment. And actually, for the human, is the same.
However, we are probably further away from living in harmony with our environment than ever before. Nowhere is this more evident than in our relationship with the chicken.
If you ask me if I like some of this chicken very much, I love them all. If you talk about life, which is the metaphor that I use for this project, you don't go on this scale of aesthetics. This is the force of life, and life you have to embrace and you have to love it. And if you start to make a difference, I think this is not the meaning of the whole project.
The animals in Van Mechelen's museum are works of art. And the domestication of animals is perhaps one of the greatest achievements in human history. It has changed human and animal and created a bond that humankind will maintain until the end of its own existence.